Can you all hear me with this mic? Okay, thanks. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I just want to say what an honor it is to have a show in this beautiful gallery in this wonderful institute that I visited before this. And thank everybody with emailing and doing all the stuff to help it. And Carol Rawlings, Diane Gilbert, and Jan Marshall helped put up my show and did a great job to be here. So I thank everybody. I just wanted to give a quick background of my career. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and I've always loved nature and the out of doors and making art. I think I've been an artist my whole life. My mother was an artist, so I always had, art materials around to work with. And after I graduated from college, I went to the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, and got a BA in fine art. And I also got a degree in secondary education because I figured I had to support myself. And I did teach art in a private school because so many of my fellow students at UPS were from Colorado, and when I visited, I just fell in love with it. So I applied for jobs there, got one, and the school had wilderness programs to Canyonlands, to the Grand Canyon, to the Missouri River, and I started falling even more in love with the Southwest. So that really clicked for me with this part of the world, and I never went back to the Northwest. After my teaching job for a few years, I had always wanted to work for myself. So I had studied that service, and I kept studying, getting better, and I did know how to illustrate. So I hung up my shingle and started my own graphic design studio, which I ran up until recently, really. I mean, I still have that studio. And in 1985, I was approached by a greeting card company, and that became my full-time work as a freelancer for a company called Lean & Tree, which is based in Boulder, Colorado. And that was a wonderful job that I did up until the mid-century as a supplement. And now, in my later years, I am choosing to spend my time doing my own studio work. So I don't do things for other people. I'm where I am now. And the reason I call it Traveling the Artistic Road, if anybody read the description of the talk, it's like a road trip. If you're a certain age and you've been doing this for a while, there's the excitement, there's the journey, there's the setbacks, there's the detours, there's the new equipment, it does remind me of a long road trip. So hence the title. So now we will begin. My humble beginnings. Actually, my parents were quite adventurous, and they moved from New York City, where they met, to Seattle, the outskirts of Seattle, Washington, and bought this cabin, which they later made into their home. And so I grew up in this landscape. I never lived in that cabin, but I grew up in that landscape and just had a great time, running around. And now that land is covered with McMansions, thanks to Microsoft and Amazon. So even as a little kid, I loved to play and paint and draw outside. And these were my neighbor siblings, the neighbor kids, and we had this big patio, and because it would always rain in Seattle that this would wash away, our parents let us draw endlessly with chalk and make these villages and play with these towns that we made, and it was just endless fun and just a great opportunity. So those were my little friends. And I think I was starting to become an art director in that picture. So early on in my art, I realized when I look at some of these that I think lettering and illustration were something I was going to put together in my later life, and that served me as a greeting card designer. And maybe most of us in this audience can remember those big prints of newsprints we got with the blank part on top and then the lines where you could write. So I loved that. And I can't remember if I wrote this or if somebody gave me the poem, but I think it's kind of sweet. So that's my very early work. So now, my husband and I love traveling in canyon country and hiking and camping, and I carry my sketchbook along and record ideas for future projects. And so here I am under the shade of a little overhang, drawing and planning. So the canyon country, I think of all country that I spend time in, is what inspires me so much because of the light and the shapes. And this is taken at the Citadel, if any of you have been there, off Cedar Mesa in Utah. Just a view through a little peak. Another picture from that same place. I'm not a photographer. When I use my camera, I look for close-up imagery that will inform me of shapes and lights and darks, not to copy, but just to have in my idea bank. I remember this one is Hackberry Canyon. Now, some of you have probably been there, and walking up the stream bed and catching this fun image of the water against sort of soaking into the rock. And winter offers a lot as well. This was taken on the Nordic track at Crested Butte, and see if this pointer, here's where they groomed the trail, and this is an ice pond, and I just loved the texture contrast that that gave me. So I'm always looking for things like that in nature as fuel for later work. Again, not to copy, but just to inform. Aspen leaves in Colorado, I mean, you can't beat it, right? And then colorful leaves in Oregon. Totally different palette, but beautiful. And wet, because Oregon is wet, so the colors are more saturated. And this, so there might be some like botanist type people around this place. This is what we call skunk cabbage, but my husband, we were walking and he goes, well, I bet they have a real name for it. And he looked it up and they say it's cornhusk lily. Yeah. Do you know that? So what I like about it is the gradation. Come on, pointer, where are you? The gradation of color, and in my work you'll see a lot of that, the way the color blends. So I look for that kind of thing too. And this, I think I might have taken this when Diane and I were walking the alligator juniper here in Prescott area, which we don't have in Durango. Our juniper do not have this kind of bark. So I thought that was really cool. And lichen patterns again on the canyons. And this is Cedar Mesa, which some of you might know as Bears Ears area. They renamed it. We've been going there forever and used to just call it Cedar Mesa. It's outside of Bluff, Utah. That's our camper on the edge where we like to camp and spend time and walk and view and be outside. And this is our beautiful mountains outside of in Durango, we're very close to the mountains, and the wildflowers right now are just amazing. So that's another place, because I grew up, near mountains in Seattle, so I still love that. This is probably the only example, well, it was the only example in this show of a greeting card that I did for Leanin' Tree. And I put that in because it gives you an idea of how, like the previous picture, would inform something that I would do for a card. And I just loved being able to combine my water media painting with my lettering. It was a fabulous job. They were great people to work with. And as an artist, I was really making a living. So that was exciting. When I have time, and it's not always true because if I'm with other people and they're on the move, I can't draw for very long. But when I have time, I like to sit and remind myself that I do know how to draw realistically. And this is a stream near where I used to live outside of Boulder that was just a lovely place to sit and contemplate nature. And using pen and ink like this is very time consuming. Those of you that do it know that. For a period of time during my, when I was working full time, I was also studying painting with a painter named Stephen Quiller. Some of you know his name. He lives in Creede, Colorado, and I loved his color sense. So I was studying painting with him, and I decided to focus on rocks and water as my subject matter because it narrowed it down to what I could paint. And this is taken from a sketch I did in Knee Canyon off the Colorado River, off Ruby and Horse Thief, any of you that have been there. Just a lovely pool up from the river. And because I'm a calligrapher, I did love putting calligraphic line and working with a flat brush into my painting. So that became kind of a style for a while. For many, many years, I have taught at Ghost Ranch in New Mexico. Some of you may have been there or know of it. And there's those beautiful cliffs rising up out of the ranch. And this is another painting done in the 90s in that same kind of calligraphic, stylized, somewhat realistic style, but pretty stylized. Now we're back on Cedar Mesa. And although this could have been a photograph because this raven was sitting on the cliff and he stayed there for a really long time, so I decided to do a drawing. And I just love drawing even more because I have to really look when I draw something, even if I do it quickly. And this is another sketchbook drawing using the contrast of values. So a lot of lights and darks in the rocks and the canyon shapes. So pretty wild, but I like to abstract the landscape. And I don't consider myself a plein air painter. I consider myself a plein air drawer. So when I go out, I typically use black and white. Sometimes I use color, but what I can do, what I can do with some of these materials, like here, I'll use a kind of pencil that is water soluble, so I can take a brush filled with water and get my values quickly in a sketch. Sometimes it's fun to just stack a bunch of letters together. I call this Calligraphic Canyon. And it's not a painting, it's a sketchbook drawing, but it was really fun. More light and shadow, high contrast. So calligraphic line does figure into my work a lot, and I use tools that are like chisel edge pens so I can get line where I can get thin and thick and thin and thick and get a lot of nice line variation in my work in a single stroke. More line work. And these are all from my sketchbook. Sometimes it's just a word. And as those of you that spend time in the canyons know, the wind blows, and it's just fun, just play. This was done in the studio, but it's another example of using lettering to create a scene. So I was looking out the window. Obviously, it was a gray day. And it's fun to play with the different textures of different kinds of brushes and different styles of lettering to create a mood for a piece. And I love flourishes, so that's always fun. And sometimes I'm just whimsical. We have a lake nearby where we paddle our kayaks, and there's lots of blue herons. And when I got home, I made this kind of funny little guy. And I do know now that the tail of a heron does not go like that. But the design required it, okay? All right, now we're going, again, this is a detour and a U-turn. This is quite an early painting of mine. I am a kayaker, and in the 70s I was studying oil painting. It was right after I quit my teaching job, and I was studying at an art school and doing a lot of palette knife oil painting. And I wanted to do something that would show the drama that I feel as a whitewater kayaker. And I was really happy with how that came out. It's quite a large painting. It's probably one of the largest I've ever done. It's about probably 2 feet wide by 4 or 5 feet long. And here's an example of a calligraphic kayaker. So this guy is in the same paddling position as the previous guy, but this one was done later with ink and watercolor with calligraphy pens. So it's fun to play with that different kind of illustration. And of course, I did this one later, but it was based on the composition of the earlier one. Another calligraphic drawing, calligraphic carrot, done with calligraphy pens and inks. The pens, I have these very wide pens that can take a lot of ink, and I can gesturally draw with them, which is a lot of fun. I learned in doing both my original pieces and my greeting cards that it was often successful to use those calligraphy tools to make the illustration, because it was the same tool that I was going to write the text with. So there was some kind of relationship between that, so that there was a harmony between having a text and having an illustration. So this is an example of that. Okay, so back in the early 2000s, again, I had been studying with Steve Quiller, and we had a painting technique where we worked on acrylic board and laid rice paper on it to form a really good solid backing that then could be written or painted over with a water media. And I did this piece, I did a series where I would do that kind of background and then write a text. And this piece was done right after 9/11. And I did quite a few response pieces to 9/11 that were pretty gory. But I wanted to do something that would feel like the world wasn't, going to hell, really. I just wanted to do something, and I'm going to read this to you in case you can't. It's, "My heart breaks for the troubles of this world, yet I simply must take delight at the first snow on the high peaks, the rustle of yellow leaves at my feet, the moon rising in the cerulean sky. I simply must feel wonder." And that became a theme for one of my books, actually, that is in the show. I ended up doing a wonder piece for every season of the year. And it really helped my heart. Another example of that kind of painting with words that are not quite legible. This says earth, rock, brush, wind, and sky, to blend into the background and suggest the canyon feeling. Another one, with this kind of painting, what I tried to do was create a composition in the background that would allow for a text to be on top of it so they wouldn't be fighting each other. And I wrote this one when I was in New Mexico, and I said, in this land of expansive sky and open vistas, learn to find your way without a trail. Let the contours of the land gently guide you. Trust the curve, the slope, light and shadow, your own instinct, and your own sense of direction. And this was a little bit of a prelude to me looking for my sense of direction, because I was a little bit at a turning point in what I was going to do with my art. So I almost feel like this was a bit of a premonition. Back on the river, this is the San Miguel River near Telluride. And being a kayaker, I can watch water move and I just love it. I could sit and stare at this for hours, and I love being in it. And so I took a picture of the river. And I'm not sure if that led to this particular piece, but what I did in this piece, well, I'll give you a background. This was done in 2008, and it was right after my mother had died after a long, drawn-out illness of old age. She was almost 97 when she died, and I was just wiped out. And get some water here. So I was thinking, what do I want to do now? I'm in the studio, and so I took a great big sheet of Reeves BFK paper, and I just started making marks with a calligraphy tool and trying to give the sense of moving water. And this is a kind of ink called walnut ink that is really fun to work with. And so I was just going away, and I just started feeling something happen. So then I started adding graphite to it, and I started playing, and I was going, I really am having a great time. I'm going to do a few of these. So this one is called Flow, and I feel like it was getting me back, corny, but back in the flow of life. This one, maybe you can't read it, but it says Turbulence. And this one, again, based on the movement of the river and the water, I started playing with how I could use a word and create. As a graphic designer, I love to create compositions, so create something around the word and then do something against it, like this graphite composition of a wave, and play with that to suggest. This one, I don't know if anybody can read it. I can. It says canyon. Canyon. Okay, now, that's not the intention. None of these were intended to be read, only if you felt like it. But I always started with a word that I would put down in some sort of way, and you see the C, the A, N, Y, O, N, okay? And then work around it with graphite to suggest a canyon, to suggest possibly a waterfall, possibly rockfall, possibly a cloud. It didn't matter to me whether anybody got it. I just was playing with my emotional response to the canyons. Wind, pretty obvious. The letters are blown away. Okay. Splash. And so the first part of the piece would start very quickly. Like I would write these walnut, the brown areas, I would write with a pen and do very quickly. So it was really spontaneous. And then I'd go back in and fill with graphite places that I wanted to add to make the composition in this one sheet of paper balance and create design. And I did throw a little watercolor in. I used, just for you painters, I had the walnut ink, and then I threw a little manganese blue and a little cadmium orange in there just for little touches of color, but barely. And this one is possibly the most obscure. This one's called Arch, and this is the A, and this is the trail with the rest of the word in it. And my husband and I have a favorite place in Canyon of the Ancients National Monument, where we can hike up a really winding trail to a wonderful arch. And that's what gave me the idea to do this piece. And my husband really likes it. Now we go back in time. So when I was going through my pictures, I realized that over the years, my hair has gotten shorter and grayer. But this is probably 20 years ago or more, and it illustrates something that created another turning point in my life. I was invited by a dear friend to learn solar plate printmaking for a weekend, as if. And she said, I'd like to learn some book structures. Let's get together and I'll teach you solar plate and you can teach me how to make simple books. So I went to her studio and I absolutely fell in love with solar plate printmaking because of what I saw I could do with it. And I had taken some printmaking in college, but I really hadn't followed up on it. So I just couldn't stand it. I had to buy a press. But I didn't feel almost like I deserved it yet because I was such a newbie. So through a friend, I got a really good deal on a very small press that I put in a little nook in my studio. And I worked on that press for at least 15 years and did a lot of good work on it, but it was small and it didn't allow me to do some of the things that I wanted to. So I was thinking, how on earth am I going to get a bigger press in that little space? Well, what happened is I learned that this is a Takach press. It's made in Albuquerque, and it's on wheels. So I have this large press that takes a full sheet of 22 by 30-inch paper, and I can roll it out of my nook and into an open area of my studio. And now this is the area where I do all my inking and hanging things to dry. And then when I'm done printmaking, I roll it back in, and if I'm doing other work, I have the rest of the studio for that. So it's worked out great. And it was a big investment, but I had felt like after all those years, I kind of could deserve it. This is an example of one of my earliest solar plate prints, and what I did when I first started was work very simply in black and white. And this was a scene from New Mexico, and another scene from New Mexico. We lived there for a few years in between Colorado. So, back in the canyons. As you can see, when I take my pictures, I like to look at shape. And I love this picture because you can see a lot of depth in it, or you can see it really flat. But I just love the shadow shape that I saw there. And this is off Cedar Mesa again, where when you're on the edge, you do see a lot of rock leaning off the edge of the mesa. So here's an example of what I might do in my sketchbook after looking at something like that shape on the edge of the rock. And it's very quick, but I do it to just get a real simple idea of how I might compose something later. Another example of that same kind of idea. And here I was setting up some shapes, maybe not exactly based on that photo, but shapes based on some prints I thought I would do in solar plate. And I came up with a series, and these prints are in my book in the show called On Canyon Time. And they're not very big prints, but they're 3 plates of printing. So they're 3 separate runs on the press, getting the texture of the rock and the color. And compositions that relate, but that are not exactly the same, although the colors were the same in various degree. Okay, back to Colorado. I love Nordic skiing, and in Durango, in 20 minutes I can be there. And it's just a beautiful set of trails, really 20 minutes from my house. And one day I was skiing up there, and there is one section of the trail that goes through this aspen grove. And I didn't mention earlier about my adventurous parents, but I did start skiing when I was 2. So I've been a skier my whole life too, and I absolutely love it. So this aspen grove was really speaking to me, and I came back to the studio and immediately picked up an unprocessed solar plate and made a drawing on it. And I'm not going to try to explain solar plate to everybody in this talk. Mary's laughing because she took my class. However, a close-up here will show you I drew into areas with tools. First, I covered the entire plate with ink because the plate is light sensitive and you want to keep light from it because that'll make it harden. So I covered the whole thing with thick printer's ink, and then I drew into the ink to expose some areas that would be open to ultraviolet light. And then there were other areas of the plate that were left covered. Took it out into the sun. All the areas that were drawn away hardened. All the areas that were not drawn on did not. They stayed soft. Came into the studio, I scrubbed off the ink, and all those soft areas went away. So what I got was what is called a relief plate, which is what my prints in this show are. So you can see all the kind of textures you can get with just this process. This plate, on one run of this plate, would look like this, just with black ink. And this was would do just like a test to see what would happen with the plate. This plate, this print, which one of them is in the show, I did an edition of 15 images using this plate, but they're all different. So I call them edition variable, because this one has the black, oops, wait a minute. This one has the black ink rubbed into the recessed areas and wiped clean, and then I rolled with a roller the ochre ink over the top of the raised areas and then ran it through the press. So this was the first way I did it. This image was done on a gray paper with a black background and white ink rolled onto the bark. Oops. So what happens is I can get so many different looks with one plate. And some people would call each one of these a monotype because it's one thing, but it's used by the similar plate. But I call them edition variable. It's just a terminology. Okay, a quick drawing. This is my version of looking at that Virgo walking rain that you see sometimes on the horizon when there's a thundercloud. And you can see how quickly I have to draw sometimes, especially when I'm with my husband who doesn't wait for me. I did this quite a while ago, but the idea stayed with me. And recently I made a print based on that idea. I call this Walking Rain. And it's a monotype. It's just one of a kind. and a more complex version of that same idea in a print. Rio Animas is the river that runs through Durango. So here are river patterns on the Rio Animas done in 2008 in my sketchbook. And here's the print that came from that idea, and that print is in the show. So this is called a solar viscosity print, which I'm glad to talk to anybody about at length later. Another example of how I might work in my sketchbook is to create a format, in this case more of a square, and I got this idea of triads. I thought, I really like the idea of these three things, and how can I play with the idea of three elements that would exist in different compositions but sort of relate to one another. And in many cases, I was thinking of things like the way rocks lay on the top of a canyon wall, and because I was out in the field when I did this, but I just started making what I call roughs for this idea, to think of what I could do with triads. So again, we have the three. Another set. And here's what I came up with. I came up with a series of prints based on those ideas. And these are also monotypes, one of a kind. And I did relate them in a color scheme, but tried to make each one slightly different. And they do also involve hand coloring. One of the things about working this way, this is not a solar print. This was printed on plexiglass with colored inks. And then later, I often go in, for example, in this area, this is colored pencil that I added texture over the ochre color. And probably some black pencil over here around the rocks to sort of fill in. Another triad with suggestions of river and rock and canyon wall. I can't help myself, I love it. This one was probably a ghost print, which is a print that's run a second time without re-inking the plate. So the print was pretty pale, so I added a lot of drawing to this one. A lot of drawing here too, a lot of graphite down in here to create that feeling of dark to light. This one's quite a bit different in look, but it still has the same three elements. People see this and think of a waterfall, but you know, it's whatever you want it to be, really. I used the same colors for this one, but I muted them and neutralized them to give it a different tonal feeling. Some kind of an arch shape, again with the three elements. This is actually my favorite one. It's different from a lot of them, but again, the colors I used were a yellow ochre, muted orange, and a violet, which doesn't show up very much in this one. This probably could be a triad, but it wasn't. It was a drawing with calligraphic line, as I'm known to do. But I do feel like it might have informed this print, because it looks a little like it. This one is in the show. It's also a monotype. And the prints in the show that are in this group all have the same color scheme that I created using a neutralized purple and a yellow ochre and black, backing it on a tan piece of paper. The Animas River in winter is very lovely, and when we walk our river trail, we often see this these ice forms that to me are just fascinating. And I kind of wonder if maybe this print was informed by those. Like I said, I don't really draw from photographs, but I know that what I look at and what I take pictures of does inform what I end up doing. Okay, this piece is a one-off sort of painting, I would say, a calligraphic painting with calligraphy. And I don't particularly do wall pieces anymore. There's one in the show, but in general, I reserve my legible writing for my books. And then my wall pieces are calligraphic, but very abstract. And during the, not only COVID, but the chaos in this country, I was trying to do some art therapy. And this is a piece I did during that time, and I said, walking on the edge of change. It is in the air, on the street. The fires are burning, and not just in the forest. Now is the time to call upon the better angels of our nature. I always write my own text. I decided that many, many years ago because I feel like it's sort of a organic way of connecting my mind and my hands and my art. So all the text in my work is my own. Now this might shock you. This was another art therapy piece about reacting to the violence that has been happening in our country. And it's so therapeutic to work it out this way. And these don't go anywhere. I don't even know where this is now, but I did it and took a picture of it. Because I do wonder why. Another art therapy, if you don't vote, you may get exactly what you never wanted. And if you don't vote and you get exactly what you couldn't have imagined, don't whine. We all know what that was about. Another art therapy piece. I call this one News of the World. Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, coming to the end here now. Walking on Uneven Ground is a book that will not be in the show because I'm so fortunate that it's been purchased. But during the pandemic, when I was out hiking, I was thinking how life feels like walking on uneven ground right now. You know, we're trying to find our way. There's all sorts of things we're going to stumble over. It's crazy. And that phrase just stuck with me. So I decided to make a book about it. And this is the title page to that book. And the illustrations are calligraphic with pencil and a kind of ink I like to use, and then this graphite lettering that I'm in love with. So I'm going to read the last 2 pages to you just to close. Most of you probably know Wendell Berry's writing. And he wrote that book, What Are People For? So Wendell Berry asked, what are people for? A good question in this unusual time when most of us are advised to stay separate, stay home, stay safe, while others are called to show great acts of courage. Each one of us has something to give. Each one of us matters, now and always, at all times. Extending one's own unique gifts as a force for good out in the world could be the most powerful offering, and surely enough. And with that, that's my offering. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Louise. And we have some time for questions. And if you wouldn't mind repeating the question back so the viewers at home can hear it.
I'd be happy to.
Is the little planet a sun or a moon? Or I see a planet.
Yes, it's either a sun or a moon. I got into that, especially the one with the tree and the quote. I really liked working with shell gold, which is powdered real gold that you paint and then burnish. And I like that as really as a design element, but also as a nature element. Yeah, it does figure in quite a few things. Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. She asked. I didn't, yeah, okay. Yes.
What are some of your favorite papers that you work on?
Okay, the question is, what are some of my favorite papers to work with? Well, for my books, my favorite paper for pages is a paper called Arches Text Wove. And it's a wonderful paper that is not very heavy, but it's remarkably strong. And it can take a lot of different media. And it's wonderful to write on either with ink or graphite or whatever, or draw on. For for covers of books, I like, one of my favorites of late is a paper called Saint Armand. And it's a paper that it doesn't have a grain. So if I make a portfolio out of it and I fold different ways, I don't have to worry about cracking. But another paper is called Cave paper, which the company is now, I heard, just moving to Tucson, and they make amazing handmade papers. So those are what I like for portfolios and book covers. And for printmaking, I like, for solar plate, all those are done on Hahnemuhle copper plate paper, which is a soft paper that really likes the relief printing. It likes to emboss. And for the monotypes, I use a paper called Arch 88, which is a paper that I print on dry. So that's the most favorite at this point in time. For watercolor, I love Lana Carell cold press, if anybody is a watercolor patron.
Could you comment on what makes a velocity print, just briefly? What makes a velocity print?
Velocity print.
Viscosity.
Viscosity, I'm sorry, good. It's okay. That's all right. The question was, what makes a viscosity print? Well, in simplified terms, that has to do with the two thicknesses of the inks you use. So for my first black, in this case I rub on, it's very thick, and I rub it in and wipe the surface clean, but it's a very thick ink, okay? Then the stuff that goes on that I roll on later is thin. So it kind of the black kind of resists it, but it does lay down on the plate. So you can get two colors in one plate. Yeah, so when you see, like with the Aspen, the black was very thick right out of the jar, kind of thick, or even thickened ink, and the other was thinned with a thinning material, so it kind of slid over the top. Does that make sense? Great, thank you. It's a good question. Yes?
Do you have words in all your art?
Do I have words in all my art? No, not necessarily in the prints that you see here that are on the wall. But I do sometimes, as you saw in the series with the canyons. It just depends on how I'm feeling. Sometimes they work their way in. I mean, sometimes if I'm doing something abstract, I just do stream of consciousness and let some words come out, but not. Sometimes I do things where I don't want anybody to know what I'm thinking. And so there's words, but you don't want to know what they are. Thanks. Yes?
It seems like you're always liking to learn new things. Is there a new technique that you're wanting to learn?
At this point, the question, is there a new technique I'm wanting to learn? Well, I feel like I'm kind of new at making books yet. And I'm leaning towards more of that. In the last, I would say, maybe 5 years, I fell in love with writing in graphite, like my books. And I'm so taken by that it makes me want to do more. So I consider that a little bit new for me. And I also want to make new prints to go in new books. So it'll always change. I'm sure of that. There's a million things you can do with printmaking that I haven't even touched. So I'm open to it. Yes?
Are your graphite letters built up, or are
Qu-
you using some kind of liquid?
The question is, are my graphite letters built up? And the answer is yes. And the answer is also that it's incredibly time consuming. So when I do my lettering, because I really like rhythm, I think lettering the rhythm of lettering is so important. So when I do something, I write it out in what I'd call monoline. And I never line paper. I just gave that up a long time ago. There's a quote by a famous calligrapher, I think it's Alfred Fairbanks, that said, writing between two lines is like dancing in a room with no height, like low ceiling. Line my words, so I let them kind of dance. So I write them out, and I let them just fall where they may. And then I go back and painstakingly, knowing what the weight distribution of letters is supposed to be, I build it according to the way they're supposed to be. Or just opposite of the way they're supposed to be if I want to. But all the lettering in the books here are all done in graphite, and they took forever. I do fast gestural work, and then it's very contemplative, though. It's a nice balance for my brain and my energy. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Louise. We have a Natural History Institute hat for you.
Yay!
And thank you all for coming. And we have the gallery open. I hope you go in there and enjoy it. Thank you,
Thanks,
Louise.
everybody. I appreciate it.